In the mid-1990s, Brian McKnight was the voice that played at every prom, every wedding, and every quiet moment between two people falling in love. His songs became the soundtrack of a generation. But behind the velvet voice and the Grammy nominations was a man who, by his own admission, had never truly found what his music described. Then, at the age of 44, something changed. He met a woman who was not a celebrity, not a pop star, not a Hollywood name. She was a doctor, a Filipino-Hawaiian woman from a world entirely removed from red carpets and chart positions. And when Brian McKnight married her on New Year's Eve 2017, the world had questioned. Who is she? What happened to his first family? And where does this love story stand in 2026? The answer is more complicated and more human than most people expected. Brian McKnight was born on the 5th of June, 1969 in Buffalo, New York. Over the course of his career, he built one of the most respected catalogs in contemporary R&B as a singer, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, and record producer. Through the 1990s and into the early 2000s, his name was synonymous with sophisticated, emotionally honest music. Songs like Back at One Anytime and One Last Cry turned him into a permanent fixture on radio and a perennial fixture on Grammy ballots. He had the kind of voice that did not demand attention, it simply commanded it. But fame, as it so often does, came with a complicated personal life running quietly in the background. Known in the 1990s and early 2000s as one of the most popular male R&B singers in the music industry, subsequent years would see Brian McKnight become more widely known not just for his music but for the turbulence in his family life. From 1990 until 2003, Brian was married to his former wife, Julie McKnight, and together they had two sons, Brian McKnight Jr. and Nico McKnight. He also fathered a daughter, Brianna, from a separate relationship, 3 children, a 13-year marriage, and by 2003, a divorce that would cast a long shadow over the decades that followed. By the time the 2010s arrived, Brian McKnight was still recording, still touring, still filling seats. But something in his personal story felt unresolved. He was in his mid-40s, and the love songs he had written for millions of listeners had not yet found a permanent home in his own life. According to Brian McKnight himself, it was love at first sight when he met Dr. Leilani Malia Mendoza. He has stated that it took him 42 years to find her, and that they were more married than any married couple even before their 2017 wedding. The pair began dating in 2014. Leilani was not a figure from the entertainment world. Before her relationship with Brian, she had worked as a Hawaiian tropic model, but by the time they met, she had built an entirely different kind of career. Leilani is a certified pediatric neuropsychologist at the Children's Hospital in Los Angeles. She is, in every sense of the word, a professional devoted to the well-being of children, specifically children navigating some of the most difficult neurological challenges of their young lives. She is of Filipino and Hawaiian descent. She came from a background rooted in academic achievement and quiet dedication. She was not someone chasing the spotlight. She was someone who had built a life of substance and the spaces between it. For Brian, that contrast appears to have been the point entirely. Here was a man who had spent decades in the center of public attention, and the woman who finally captured his heart was someone who had chosen depth over visibility. That combination, celebrity meeting quiet strength, gave their relationship a dimension that simply could not be manufactured. They kept much of their courtship private. When he proposed in May 2017, he shared the news on Instagram with a simple image and a sense of joy that, even through a screen, felt genuine. The engagement ring, a cushion-cut halo design, spoke to a relationship that was both romantic and considered. When the engagement was announced, reactions were immediate and mixed. Fans of Brian's music were largely supportive. Here was a man who had written endlessly about love finally appearing to have found it. Others were curious, not unkindly, but genuinely so. Who was this woman? What did she represent in the context of his very public personal history? The cultural dimension of their relationship drew interest as well. Leilani's Filipino and Hawaiian heritage resonated with Filipino communities around the world who took a quiet pride in seeing one of their own standing beside an American music icon. In the Philippines and across the Filipino diaspora, the story of Leilani Mendoza was followed with genuine warmth. Some commentary focused on the contrast between their two worlds, a Grammy-nominated R&B star A pediatric neuropsychologist, it was not the kind of pairing that tabloids are built to explain, and perhaps that was exactly what made it compelling. Leilani Malia Mendoza married McKnight on the 31st of December 2017. The New Year's Eve wedding took place at the Owika Castle Hotel and Estate in Huntington, New York. The bride wore a jaw-dropping gown embellished with 50,000 Swarovski crystals. Strategic appliques were the only coverage on the sheer dress, with fan detailing throughout the skirt and train. Brian shared photographs and video clips across his social media, writing simply, "Ladies and gentlemen, introducing Mr. and Mrs. Brian McKnight." He also shared a photo of the couple walking hand in hand down the aisle, captioning it, "Happiest day of our lives." The couple moved forward as a family. Leilani came into the marriage with 2 children, Julia McPhee and Jack McPhee, whom Brian began fathering as his own. Their family continued to grow, but not without heartbreak. The couple tragically experienced a pregnancy loss with a son they named Kikoa Mateo. Brian addressed the loss publicly on social media in May 2022, writing that the strength he witnessed in Leilani through that grief left him in awe. Then, in January 2023, the couple welcomed a son, Brian Kainoa Makoa McKnight, with Brian writing on Instagram, "For this child we have prayed, and the Lord has granted us the desires of our hearts." In 2025, Brian publicly praised Leilani on Instagram, writing, "I would not be the man and father I am today if you were not by my side. Thank you for being a devoted partner and a present mother to our kids. I thank God every day for giving me you, Leilani Malia Mendoza." No chapter of Brian McKnight's story in recent years can be told without acknowledging the weight of his estrangement from his older children and the way that estrangement has intersected with his marriage to Leilani. There is a long history of bad blood between Brian and his eldest sons. Brian consistently took to social media to air his grievances with his sons, referring to them as entitled, spoiled, and brainwashed by their mother. In 2024, he publicly referred to his estranged children as a product of sin, a statement that drew immediate and widespread criticism. Brianna, his daughter from a prior relationship, made headlines when she sued her father for defamation in 2020. When the lawsuit was settled before trial, Brian subsequently shared court documents showing he had agreed to pay Brianna more than $250,000. The most devastating chapter arrived in May 2025. Brian's estranged son Nico passed away at the age of 32 on May 29, 2025 after a battle with cancer. Brian Jr. later claimed that their father, when approached by Nico, had responded by saying, "I can't arbitrarily say that I love you." Brian disputed that account, but his former wife Julie described Brian Jr.'s account as a heartbreaking reflection of events. In 2026, McKnight filed a defamation lawsuit in March against the Ricky Smiley Morning Show and its parent company, Urban One, targeting a radio interview in which his former wife Julie appeared alongside claims he characterized as false portrayals of him as an abusive and neglectful father. These controversies are painful, complex, and very much ongoing. Leilani has remained largely removed from the public dimensions of this conflict, present in Brian's social media as a devoted mother and partner, but not a participant in the very public war of words. In 2026, Leilani Malia Mendoza McKnight continues to lead a life that exists largely outside the noise her husband's name generates online. She remains a certified pediatric neuropsychologist, continuing her work at the Children's Hospital in Los Angeles, a career built on helping the youngest and most vulnerable patients navigate neurological conditions that most people will never have to face. The couple is based in Phoenix, Arizona, where they are raising their young family. Brian Kainoa Makoa, born in 2023, is now a toddler. Julia and Jack, Leilani's children from before the marriage, are growing up within what Brian regularly presents on social media as a close-knit household. Leilani makes occasional public appearances at charitable events. She and Brian attended Celebrity Fight Night in Phoenix as far back as 2019, and she has remained a steady presence at his side during public engagements. But she is not a public figure by design. She is, by all visible evidence, a woman who made a deliberate choice to stand beside a famous man without becoming consumed by the apparatus of his fame. Their marriage, now approaching 9 years together and 7 years since the wedding, shows no signs of fracture. Whatever the storm circling the McKnight name in recent years, Leilani appears to be the still point at the center of them. There is something quietly instructive about the story of Brian McKnight and Leilani Malia Mendoza. A man who spent his entire adult life narrating love in 4-minute intervals finally found it, not in the world that made him famous, but in a woman who had built her life entirely on her own terms. She is a doctor, a mother, a partner, and by every indication, the most stabilizing force in a life that has otherwise been marked by significant public turbulence. She did not change to enter his world. In many ways, he appears to have been changed by entering hers. What does it mean when a celebrity finds love outside the orbit of celebrity itself? And do we, as an audience, allow people to be more than the most complicated chapters of their story? Those are questions worth sitting with. Leave your thoughts in the comments below.